Hello, my fellow readers. This is Dark Symphony 777 with another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. Quick little announcement before I get into the review. I would like to say that I'm actually almost done with backlog. I have about less than 15 stories left. Once I get to a specific story called Dynamic Equilibrium, I will be taking suggestions again. So just wait until after I do that video. I will be making a separate video just talking about me suggesting stories. But until then, just hold off on any suggestions or stuff like that. So just bear with me at least a little bit longer, because I'm almost at Dynamic Equilibrium. That story's just going to take a while to read because that story's big. But let's get into the actual review. So, the story I'm doing is not one, it's 3 stories at once. It's a trilogy of short stories written by Starlit Duck. They are part of the Super Koopa-ling series. I know you're probably kind of annoyed with Super Koopa things. However, I did promise the authors that I would do the stories up to a certain point, which would be episode 23, I believe. And then after that, I'm going to do the rest. I'm going to basically just PM her my thoughts on the rest of the series. So don't worry, we're almost there. We're pretty much over halfway there at this point with this video. So the reason I say this is called the Frostwall Trilogy is because this was a story that finally revealed what happened. Because I did mention that all throughout some of the other stories that something happened with Ludwig von Koopa, and something that happened with the city of Frostwall. So one of these stories kind of reveals what happens. But before I talk about that, let's just talk about the general plot of episode 12, which is called Ludwig's Clone. So the plot of the story actually starts very simple. Ludwig is practicing the guitar. The guitar string breaks, and he goes to Iggy's lab. That's how most of these stories start. It either has to do with Iggy or it has to do with Iggy's lab. It's kind of getting weird that she's relying so much on that lab. Yeah, just thought I'd mention that. And Ludwig starts looking for a guitar string to replace his guitar. He finds out he's kind of chipped a nail, so he's like, eh. He clips it and he throws it behind him. And then he sees something. He kind of hears something activate. He turns around. He sees a machine that Iggy made open up, and it's him, or more accurately, a clone of him. And so the story kind of just follows Ludwig and the clone just trying to figure out what to do. And the clones are like, what's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this? And Ludwig's like, that's a book, that's an egg, that's a TV, that's a cartoon. I don't like cartoons, that's sports. Yeah, I like sports. I don't like sports. The story kind of has the clone kind of get some cloning roots, why am I'm a clone? I should be exactly like Ludwig. Why am I not like Ludwig? And they try to wonder, and then the clone named Bob. Yeah, that's how every impromptu thing I guess named. Said, you, what's that bottle of bleach called? Bob. Who's on first? Bob! Who's the first contact on your phone? Bob! Oh, I got too low into that. And the story kind of basically ends with them realizing that the Bob has to go and do his own experiences, has to go on his own adventure, and so they give him a bunch of treaties, we'll wander dark lands, have fun, discover yourself, do whatever you want. You can be an adventurer, you can be a Joe Schmo, you can just do whatever you want. And basically the story ends with Bob actually just leaving Bowser's castle and just wanting to do his own thing. The reason now you're thinking, wait, that's it? That's pretty much the plot. The reason I didn't talk too much, I very, very generalized it, is because it does come back into play in episode 14. But now we got the big one, episode 13. So the story starts with Ludwig going to a graveyard. He sees someone. He visits a grave called Arya. You know, he mourns her of what happened, and then he gets captured by Dupless of all people. That's, you know what? I want to mention this. Why Dupless of all people? It's like I get that you kind of hinted that, you know, Dupligos have basically want Ludwig to basically turn into Ludwig so that way they have access to his powers. I get that, but why Dupless specifically? Because Dupless is more of a schoolyard bully. Like, he plays pranks. He turned what in Thousand Year Door. He turned people into pigs because it was just funny to him. He turned into Mario and then stole the letter P from the text screen, so that way you couldn't spell his name. In a very meta moment. I'm just curious about why Dupless specifically, especially since, you know, like the last time we saw Dupless canonically was in Thousand Year Door, and he was getting bullied by Beldam, called useless and all that, like Vivian. But anyway, Dupless does the whole switcheroo with Dupligos thing, basically takes over Ludwig's body, and said, "Aha! I'm gonna take over, and I'm gonna destroy everything," and then leaves. All the other Koopalings kind of find out that Ludwig's not exactly Ludwig, and they manage to capture Dupless, and then find out that, hey, if they're separate, if I copy the body long enough, then Ludwig will disappear forever. And so little Lemmy goes off to try and find Ludwig. He finds a chain chomp tied to a tree. He unplugged. He saves it. Chain chomp licks him, wanders off, and finds out he has Ludwig in his head. Oh. Yeah, I'm going the full spooky. I'm spooky. And then we get to the big thing. After a while, they wander around trying to get back to Darkland and trying to find out trying to stop Dupless so Ludwig can get his buddy back. Ludwig finally tells Lemmy and us, the readers, what happened all those years ago. To wit, when Ludwig was a kid, he didn't discover what specials were. Specials, like the whole reference to the Lego movie is like, where's the crackle? We need the crackle! The crackle! Sorry, I couldn't resist. And so he's wandering, trying to find out information, but then he found out that more or less the information's been purged from the Bowser library. He asked the Koopa Troopa basically said, hey, I know there's this little city called Frostwall that has a library of ancient text and books and stuff like that. Maybe you might find it there. So Ludwig, in the middle of the night, leaves the castle, sneaks into Frostwall, meets this little Koopa girl named Arya. They kind of become friends. And then her father manages to get him into the library so he can read out what happens. Kamek follows. Ludwig...
A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. How about you?
Sorry about that. Kamek follows. Ludwig finds out that the whole point of the specials were supposed to be living weapons and were meant to cause destruction and chaos and stuff like that. He gets pissed because it's I was bred as a weapon? How dare you? And then Kamek shows up saying we have to I'll tell you more when we get back to the castle. It's no, you'll tell me now. Not now. And then Ludwig gets pissed because he's a child. He can't really control his emotions. And so he starts destroying the town in uncontrollable. He doesn't realize what he's doing until Kamek kind of causes an avalanche and crushes the entire city, killing everyone in it, including Arya, literally everyone. Everyone. Foreshadowing. And Ludwig had to live with the survivor, that guilt for so long, and hence why he's very closed off, he's very unemotional, and he just doesn't want something like that to happen again. Lemmy is very sympathetic, and wants things like, I want you to heal, I want you to heal, I want you to get better, I want you to realize it's not your fault, and all that he has. Meanwhile, all the other Koopalings are dealing with Dupless, who is deliberately not going to sleep, because guess what? Specials, they get more powerful the less sleep they get. So he's deliberately fighting sleep, so that way he can get more power and get out of the cage that he's locked in, which eventually happens. He does eventually break out. He starts destroying all of Bowser's city, and just starts causing like chaos and disharmony and all that stuff. Lemmy and Ludwig get back. Ludwig manages to get his body into Dupless, and so they kind of duke it out in Ludwig's mindscape. All the Koopalings are like cheering him on, and which weakens Dupless enough for Ludwig to beat Dupless. And then finally the story ends with Ludwig actually revealing the whole thing with Frostwall to the other Koopalings. That's fine. In terms of the plot for this specific story, I think it was good, especially that reveal, except honestly, I think there should have been more to the actual reveal. Like, the general plot is not bad, because a interesting fact about these three stories is it honestly feels like the author is trying to abandon the whole cartoony thing. Like I mentioned in previous videos of the Super Koopaling series, that the author was going for this very cartoony vibe, but starting with these trilogy, it looks like she's slowly starting to get rid of the cartoon elements and try and make it more grounded and kind of make it more edgy, like the live action remix. But she's trying to make it less cartoony, so that way it kind of flows better and kind of reads better to the people who want to read it and stuff like that. But I can respect her for making that decision, especially in episode 14. Episode 14 is when you really tell that she's really experimenting. Like here, you only get a taste of it. Like when the writing of this story is actually more contemplative. Like it doesn't really rely a lot on cartoon physics and cartoon logic and stuff like that. But it has, like when Ludwig is showing Lemmy what happened, like there's not a lot of dialogue. It's mostly prose of just body language. There's a neat little moment of when Lemmy's watching Arya and Ludwig kind of dance to some music. He looks at Lemmy looks at the older Ludwig, and he's like slightly slapping his fingers, and he kind of has like a very melancholy look on his face. It was very well done use of using more body language and prose rather than full dialogue, like the whole show don't tell sort of approach that a lot of authors use. So that's very well done. And then for the plot of episode 14, we go back with Bob. Oh boy, Bob! So basically the whole point of episode 14 is actually very different from anything written so far, because half the story is actually told from the first person, from a character named Sheila, who is actually a survivor of Frostwall. Basically, she basically became engaged on the instant when Ludwig destroyed the town, and she tried to escape with her husband, but her husband wanted to try and get his family to come along, but then the whole avalanche happened while she was out of town and killed everyone, and she's like completely kind of dealing with a lot of survivors guilt and PTSD and stuff like that. And so she lives in this town called Sparksville, where she owns a bakery and stuff like that. But that's I'll talk more about that in a bit. Let me just catch you up to speed with the whole Bob thing. So basically, Bob sends a letter to the Koopaling saying that he found a town in Sparksville, and he wants to show them around Sparksville, show them off his house. He's getting a job. He's basically doing the old average Joe thing. Like I'm expecting. I don't know what job it is, but I'm expecting something average. Maybe retail. Who knows? But basically, they decide, hey, let's just bring some. Let's bring some gifts. Let's bring some housewarming gifts. So they go. They basically, they say we're gonna help you set up the house and everything. And so Bob shows them around the town. They go into the bakery that Sheila works at, basically owns, and Sheila starts having flashbacks to the Saints because she sees Ludwig and Bob. She thinks it's Bob who's the one who caused the whole situation, and she starts getting like traumatic experiences. And so she basically wants revenge on Bob, because we know it's not Bob, it's really Ludwig, for what happened with Frostwall. So she basically just, she mainly, literally just, mostly does like a minor thing like throw eggs at the house. Because, she's still a nice person at heart, and she really doesn't have it in her to do anything truly evil. So Sheila gets kidnapped by a biker gang. The leader, who's a magic Koopa, turns out to actually have been another survivor who managed to escape with use of his broom, and manages to fly off and stay safe. It's fine. And so they kind of come up with a revenge scheme that involves Cameron capturing Bob and just punishing him. However, Sheila realizes that his methods are going too extreme because he's going to use because at this point in time, Bob is going for the interview. The Magic Koopa, his name is Cameron, I believe, with a C. His idea is basically just grab a bomb, toss it in the building, destroy a bunch of stuff and potentially hurt anyone, and kidnap Bob. So basically what happens is that's actually what happens. He throws a bomb. Sheila backs out of it because she wants revenge, but she doesn't want to actually kill the person. Like, she doesn't want to do something. She's like, that's too far. Cameron takes Bob, kidnaps him, just goes away, and then when the Koopalings go to find him, they manage to get to the biker gang's base. They find him and said, oh, yeah, I dealt with him. And then they find out that Bob died. That's not the end of the story. The end of the story actually is a tiny little mini arc at the end, with Ludwig begging Iggy to rebuild a time machine from a couple episodes ago, so that way he can go back to the events of Frostwall and stop himself from destroying town, because he thinks this is kind of too far and stuff like that. And so Iggy's like, you do realize this causes problems with the time-space continuum, right? So yeah, I don't care. Do it. All right. And so Iggy rebuilds the time machine. They go back. Ludwig and Sheila go back in time. Sheila, so that way he can tell her future husband where she is, like in the bakery. While Ludwig goes to stop kid Ludwig, and basically save the town. And so this causes a sort of weird incident to happen. So basically, there was two timelines. On one timeline, it was the one where Frostwall was destroyed, and the other one was when it wasn't destroyed. And so when Ludwig stopped himself, the timelines kind of converged into one hybrid timeline. So everyone has memories of both timelines. Kamek was actually prepared for this, so he basically, because in order to stop Baby Ludwig, he basically told Kamek, he's like, I'm Ludwig from the future. I'm gonna stop myself. And so basically, Kamek came up with like this magical therapy that he'll ask each of the everyone who is like, you have two timelines. Which timeline do you want gone? And he'll just take whichever, and he slowly erase over time the memories of the timeline that they didn't want. And that's basically what happens with Ludwig, all of the Koopalings, and Sheila. And the story kind of ends with Sheila getting married. So, and also Bob living again. So the plot of all three stories, they're very interconnected. And again, that's another kudos to the author, because instead of making like it's just three separate stories, but they all connected, but they all do their own separate thing. For the plot, I actually really liked it. It was very simple. It shows that the author is willing to learn new techniques, new tactics, because in episode 14, not only is a story told mostly from Sheila's point of view, it's in first person, and honestly, first person was better than anything she's written in third person so far. Guys, I'm not even insulting her, because more than likely she did, like, I read some of her later works, she has actually improved a lot, but it kind of makes me wonder why she hasn't gone back to first person yet, because first person was just so much better. But the plot, basically, if you're reading these on their own, as a separate story each, they're not that good. If you read them as a trilogy, like you have to read them one after the other, then the plot actually becomes decent. It doesn't become spectacular. Like all three stories are very short. They're between 10 and 30,000 words, as is the norm with Starlight Duck's works. But it's fine. I wouldn't say it's spectacular, especially how I honestly think maybe the whole reveal with Frostwall could have been done a little better. But other than that, fine. Characters. We're only going to talk about three specific characters, because for the most part, these are the three specific characters across all three stories. And they are Bob, Ludwig, and Sheila. Let's start with Bob. I like Bob. He's basically, you have the Koopalings, who are these kind of goofy characters, and you have Bob, who's just like, hi, how are you? I even joked in my head that the job that Bob was getting was like basically to work at a propane store, and Bob would go, hi, I'm Bob, I sell propane and propane accessories. I want a story about Bob, damn it. Give me a story about Bob, just doing Bob things. It could just be Bob wakes up, eats a bowl of cereal, goes to work, goes to sleep. The end. There could be no conflict, nothing. It's just him doing the most mundane stuff, and it'll work because that's what Bob is. I like Bob. I genuinely do like Bob, because he's such a natural fit for the story, because like I said, you have the Koopalings, who are these dynamic characters, who are, and the author is clearly experimenting with them and still trying to improve them and do all these characters and basically have them grow as people and stuff like that. You have Ludwig being his special powers, Iggy with his science, Lemmy with his lemminess, and Roy with his dumbassness. And then you have Bob, who's literally just there. And I don't know, but somehow the author made just a boring, plain character work by just saying this is a minor character. He's just there. He's Bob, and I like that. Ludwig, I do like the fact the author went out of her way, because more or less in these three stories, Ludwig is the main character. Sure, each story technically has a second major character, i.e. the first one had Bob, the second one had Lemmy, and the third one had Sheila. But these were Ludwig's episodes. And what the author did with Ludwig by having him grow and reconcile with the fact that he, having to deal with the grief of Frostwall, and then the third story kind of whiplashing you and saying, no, I'm not over it, I want to fix it. It is nice. I do want to see what happens next, because I have a feeling, there's more that's going to happen with Ludwig. Honestly, there's probably going to be some kind of repercussions with Ludwig kind of messing everything up. Something's gonna happen, backfire on him in some way. I don't know who. I don't know when it happens. Star said that it will happen in sometime later in the series, but just not, as far as I know, it hasn't happened yet. And that's fine. Like I said, I like Ludwig. He's fine. He's fine as a main character. If it wasn't for the fact that the author relied so heavily on Iggy, or more specifically Iggy's lab, I would probably say Ludwig is probably the main character. But like, so like half of the story so far has like revolved around Iggy. That I still consider him like the main character. But that's fine. And finally, we have Sheila. Sheila's basically a girl next door. She's more of a plain Jane type, where, you know, she's just living day by day, kind of like Bob, like average Jane. But she's still dealing with she's more or less was still dealing with the grief over what happened with Frostwall, even all these years later, because, you know, PTSD and stuff like that doesn't really go away so easily. I know myself. But I do like the experiment. Like, we get heavily into her mind throughout the story through the first person of her slowly, like when she meets Ludwig and Bob, she starts freaking out, and he goes, and she's trying to contemplate why are they back? Are they here to mock me? Are they here to try and kill me? And she's trying to rationalize it over in her mind as her trauma is starting to come back. And it was very well done. And also the part where, you know, Cameron says, "We're basically, I'm going to throw a bomb into the building and then kidnap the Koopa." And she's like, yeah, it shows that while she wants revenge, she realizes that doing this would kind of put her on the same level of what Ludwig did, even though Ludwig technically only did it by accident. And, well, but then Sheila really doesn't know that. She just knows that person showed up, destroyed the town, left. And now he's back. And so she's like, she doesn't want to sink to them. So I really like Sheila as a character. Just like Bob, I actually want to see more of Sheila, because I think there's more to offer for her with in the context of the story, like mostly just as a minor character. Honestly, I don't see her outside of this specific outside of episode 14 as being a very important character. Maybe just show up every once in a while, just for like the magical therapy, because Kamek offered it to her too, and mostly just to say hi to the Koopa Links and stuff like that, and I just kind of get up to date with what's going on with her and maybe with Bob. Like I said, I don't see her as being like a major character at any other point in the series. Mostly just a minor character just showing up every once in a while. But those are the plots and the characters. Pacing and writing. These stories are very experimental because it shows that the author is willing to try new techniques, to new writing styles. Like I said, with the Frostwall flashback, it was very low in dialogue. If you read any of the earlier style stories, Super Koopalings is very much a dialogue-heavy series. It's very, very dialogue-heavy, which makes sense because, you know, cartoon. She wants to emulate a cartoon, so it makes sense that there's a lot of dialogue in the stories. But she's reining back the dialogue, to putting in more prose, putting in more exposition. Then, of course, there's the whole thing with Sheila, where it's just literally first person. And I'm not a fan of first person. I don't like first person stories because I have such a hard time reading them. There were times, even throughout episode 14, where I had to actually read the paragraph multiple times because my mind was having trouble just picturing everything. Again, I don't hate first person. It's just so difficult for me to actually read them. But I do like the experimental factor of it. It shows something that a lot of authors need to learn, and that authors never really stop learning. They always want to learn. They always need to learn new techniques, new writing styles, experiment with as much. Experiment, experiment, experiment. That's kind of a big thing when it comes to authors. You gotta always be willing to try new things, and that's honestly my favorite. One of my favorite aspects of these stories is the fact that the author is willing to learn these new techniques, willing to apply them, even if they don't work. The fact that the author is willing to try these, it's at least respectable enough that I can't hate her for it. Like I said, I'm friends with her. I more or less kind of, been helping her along more or less. But I'm willing to here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you're not doing wrong. But I'm willing to give credit where credit is due. With episode 14, it was executed well. With episode 13, it wasn't executed as well, mainly because it was way more experimental with 14. Like with episode 14, she basically kind of ironed out some of the kinks and just made it better. So it's fine as it is. So with the pacing, they're very fast paced. That's pretty much my only constant criticism so far of the Super Koopa Links is some of these stories are really too short for these own good. The Frostwall thing needed to be longer. The whole flashback just really needed to be longer. It was way too short for its own good. Considering the fact that the author has been building up this one flashback for about 11 stories now, and it's just, 2 chapters? Wrong story. Yeah, it's literally just 2 very short chapters. I was actually expecting a longer flashback. Which is why my only real big criticism about these 3 stories is that specific flashback. It's good, but it's very underwhelming for what it's trying to do. Especially with the amount of build-up the author was trying to put into it. Seeing it as is kind of comes off as a little flat. So take that as you will. Grammar errors. I think there was one grammar error. I can't remember which specific story it was. I can't remember. It's like, I'm not a grammar Nazi, so I don't care. It's literally just one grammar error. So unless the story was riddled with grammar errors or grammar punctuation and stuff, or writing, or like the author just randomly said, I'm going to write a box of text for no reason. I ultimately don't particularly care about about grammar, so that's fine. Would I recommend this story, or these stories? On their own, no. They are too short, too fragmented. Maybe episode 14 on its own, but just them on their own, no. However, as a trilogy, as a compilation of 3 stories combined, I would recommend it. Mainly because it shows a willingness for the author to try new things. And even if it fails, the fact that she tried these things, the fact that she was willing to commit to try these things, is commendable, and even earns a degree of respect that anyone should give an author for trying new things. And honestly, she deserves respect for that. Fair part. Despite the fact I had problems with the flashback, I do think the flashback is still the best part, because again, it's still good. It's just underwhelming for how much buildup was behind it. That's really the reason why I find it underwhelming, because it's just there literally almost 10 stories, 10 episodes, if you count episode 12, where basically had hints and reveals and was slowly building up to this, and I was like, it's gonna be something spectacular. I honestly thought this episode 13 was just gonna be one big flashback chapter and just kind of go into the detail of what specifically happened, and have it kind of be revealed in like a 2-chapter flashback was just very just it kind of left the sale. It kind of like it was just it wasn't bad. It was just again underwhelming. I wish it really needed to be more than it was. Sorry about that. What would I change? Honestly, let's get the easy one out of the way. Episode 14, nothing. That's fine. That could stay as it is. Episode 12, there is one tiny thing I would add. This is kind of more or less a nitpick. So near the climax of the chapter, Ludwig has to apologize to Iggy. He goes in the lab and talks to Iggy. Ludwig apologizes to Iggy about using the cloning machine, and then Iggy kind of basically accepts the apology right then and there. I thought that was just very, very poor writing. What I would add to that part is just simply have Iggy ask Ludwig, why did he use the clone machine? And then Ludwig just literally just asking, and literally have him explain that it was literally an accident. Like he was looking for the string, he tossed the nail behind him. He didn't even realize it landed in the machine, and then Iggy forgives him. So changing that part would literally just be adding like 2 or 3, maybe a paragraph. It wouldn't really change the story. It just improved the one tiny part that kind of wasn't really, was actually kind of badly written of episode 12. With episode 13, there is a couple things you could do with that story. First off, all of them have to do with that flashback. That flashback needs to be amazing. With the amount of build-up for that flashback, it needs to be more than it is now. I honestly think maybe instead of Ludwig going at night, he goes in the morning. Like, he visits Frostwall in the morning, and instead, like, he actually lets Kamek know that I'm going to visit the city. I'll make some kind of lie to Kamek and stuff like that, and he visits Frostwall in the morning. And then he spends the whole day with Arya and her family, getting to know her, to the point that Ludwig kind of gets infatuated and wants to become friends, maybe something more. And then, he kind of forgets about what happened. Like the story, the flashback needs to be longer. Maybe add, instead of, again, happening in the middle of the night, Kamek does come for Ludwig, and Ludwig just find out. But have it occur over the course of an entire day. Like, he's at Frostwall the entire time, being with Arya, spending time with her. You should, it really needs to be. It really just needs that flashback needs to be knocked out. Okay, so let's go over it piece by piece. So Ludwig talks, and Ludwig wants to find out about what the specials are. That's fine. He finds out about Frostwall. He realizes he's kind of tired. He goes to sleep. Next morning, he lies to Kamek and Bowser, saying he was going to go visit the city, kind of just look around. He goes to Frostwall. He meets Arya in the woods, and she's dancing and stuff like that. Because it kind of comes off like, when she's younger, she was a dancer. They meet. They kind of start talking. Ludwig hypes himself. I am the oldest son of King Bowser Koopa. And Arya's like, that's cute. And then Ludwig's like, you don't care? It's like, no, you're just a person. And then, Ludwig actually forgets about going to the library. And so have a couple of chapters just dedicated to them kind of meeting, exploring Frostwall, meeting all the people. Maybe get a cameo from Sheila when, if possible. And then near night, when he's supposed to go home, they kind of end it with talking to each other, just asking each other questions. And Ludwig asked Arya, it's like, hey, what's your family do? It's like, my father works for the Grand Library. And then Ludwig remembers, oh no! What? I was supposed to get the book from the library. I wanted to find out what I am, and then of course Frostwall kind of continues normally. Except have him kind of dig through the library and kind of gonna go into more detail. Him looking for it. Have Kamek show up. When Kamek shows up, they kind of get into an argument. The argument lasts a little longer. Him freaking out and then destroying the town. That's fine. That can stay as normal. But there has to be enough build up to the reveal of what specifically happened that I think maybe adding another chapter or two of just Ludwig showing up earlier, meeting Arya, befriending Arya, sort of falling for Arya because the story does imply that he kind of had something for her or like a crush. And then everything going to hell. It would hammer that moment so much more, especially at the beginning when again he goes to the cemetery. He puts the flowers on Arya's grave. It would make that moment at the beginning of episode 13 just have so much more impact once you find out what happened. But that's it. Just a little bit with episode 12 and the flashback needs to be longer. It needs to be longer than it is. And that is the Frostwall trilogy. So, what do you think? How do you think I did? I can't wait to continue on. Oh, my back actually hurting me. Yeah. So that is my review of the Frostwall trilogy. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.